Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Adventures in Brain Injury podcast. This episode is brought to you by Revive Treatment Centers in Denver, Colorado, a fantastic neurorehabilitation center that focuses on concussion, autoimmunity, and brain injury. You can check them out at revivecenters.com. My name is Kevin Ballister. I'm a severe traumatic brain injury survivor, creator of adventuresinbraininjury.com and feedthebrain.com, creator of the Feed a Brain interview series, and author of How to Feed a Brain, Nutrition for Optimal Brain Function and Repair. With me is my magnificent co-host, Michelle. What's up, Michelle?
Well, your words always warm me because I'm sitting here looking out the window at a minus 21 degrees Fahrenheit with wind chill minus 31 degrees Fahrenheit.
Man.
So it is a beautiful winter day, and we get to talk about our weather, and everything is warm over here.
Oh, we'll talk about something more than the weather.
Yes, please.
Tell me about Jessica Flanigan.
It's truly my pleasure, having discovered her work about 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, and being able to attend a workshop with her in LA a couple of months back. Her work just was a touchstone on my journey, and her book, The Loving Diet, it's on my bookshelf and on my recommended books list for all my clients. Jessica Flanigan is a clinical nutritionist who specializes in the autoimmune paleo diet. But that is not where her true work as a healer is done. Jessica works in the unified field of loving. She is a clinical nutritionist and has been for over 20 years. And she's been exclusively assisting clients with AIP for over 3 years. Her AIP clinical practice has over 1,000 clients that she draws her experience from. And she has worked extensively in private practice while also working alongside many other practitioners, including medical doctors, chiropractors, acupuncturists, and body workers. I also know Jessica's dedication to learning about the neurology behind physiological function, which is fascinating because she is a student of many years, working with or learning from Datis Karazian and Brandon Brock. Her work, and this is what really gets me, her work in the loving field is what drew me to her practice. And I was an observer, I was a learner. And so she talks about this unified field of loving in her book called The Loving Diet, and how this unified field has a way of broadening our understanding of potential that surrounds each of us as humans. And here's the clincher: when we turn toward the wholeness of who we are, then fixing is no longer needed. Now, if that does not capture your attention, if you've been struggling to recover health, I don't know what would. So let's bring on our guest, Jessica Flanigan. Thank you for being here, Jessica.
Hi, thanks for having me, Kevin and Michelle. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, it is truly our pleasure to host you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So these are really big, sweeping comments, remarks, statements, paradigm shifts. Jessica, when you start talking about food, most people can comprehend what you're about to say. And when you drop the bomb of, let's take a look at grains and dairy and eliminating those from the diet, people blow up with the thought of having to make that much change. And for today, I want to speak, yes, about what foods are going to help us move to a better physical health, but I want to talk about a physical presence and then a mental, emotional, spiritual presence that surely when you start bringing this up with your clients on how to deal with trauma, disease, challenges. Please tell me more about how you introduce this, how you work with this, how you have become a love visionary.
That was a great intro. Thank you. I'd say that, the first piece would be just introducing the concept to my clients that it's actually not about the diet. And they're like, what? You're a nutritionist. Remember Lance Armstrong wrote the book, It's Not About the Bike. And it's the same thing goes true. It's really not about the diet. And so then what we can do first is just pose the question and see what shows up. Well, what do you mean? The diet's supposed to save me. The diet is supposed to cure me. The diet is supposed to fix me. And all of those things are going outside of ourselves to find the healing. And so then, there's that piece. So just let that percolate for a second. And then the other part, what you said, Michelle, which is like, there's a lot of resistance about people who don't want to change. And so I would say, oh, that's a great clue. That's a fantastic clue. You don't want to change because going on a restrictive diet is really hard. Yes. And so then the part of that, the freedom there is you have all the information inside of yourself to embrace, be loving, be compassionate, and really just make room for the part of yourself that's scared to change, that doesn't know what that would mean if I have to give up certain foods. And so what you do is you rework your relationship to the idea that a diet's going to fix you or save you. It doesn't discount the value of a diet, however, because we know that anti-inflammatory diets are very powerful. But diet doesn't become the center of your health formula. You become the center of your health formula, and a diet just assists you. And so what I find when that happens, mixed in with all of the very progressive components that we have now that Tatis Karazian has, teaches about, that it tends to work really well. And then oftentimes when people are vulnerable enough to broaden their understanding of what it means to heal, then the restrictive experience isn't needed any longer.
Interesting. And so then let me just underscore a comment that you had made, and I think most people are coming to realize once they get into this work, is that doing this proper nutrition off of the plate, but this loving nutrition within our heart doesn't guarantee a physical healing.
No, and and you said that I've been doing AIP in the intro for 3 years, and I think I just need to update the bio on my website. I've been dealing with people eating restrictive diets now day in and day out for over 5 years. So I have a very, very good working base of people who I call perfect performers. Yes. They would be people who got an A on the crazy AIP test. They eat AIP perfectly. They follow it. They have a lot of times they have a functional medical doctor. They might have been in therapy for a while. They're the people that, say, I've already cleared up all of these things inside of myself. I still can't get better. Sometimes they take anywhere between 5 and 25 supplements. They've spent thousands of dollars on blood work. They have been on AIP for a year or more in its most restrictive phase. And by any stretch of anybody's imagination, they would be called a perfect performer, and yet they are not getting better. And so there's a very profound opportunity that I started to see right at the get-go, having the privilege of working with people who are so motivated and really willing to do anything. These are people I don't have a conversation about restricting in their diet. These are people I have a conversation with about, I've tried everything, what is going on? And a lot of times that prepares you to come to a place to take a deeper dive into your life, which is, well, what do I believe about my illness? What is my relationship to my life? What kinds of, what is the story in my life I'm defining myself by? And like, you know, Kevin and Michelle, you guys are both great examples of how you have struggled. And a lot of times and people use the word mindset, and I don't know if I would use that word in my life, but I would use the word, I'd use the yardstick of how vulnerable are you willing to be to love the places inside of yourself that hurt. And oftentimes it takes someone to get to the place where they're perfect performers to be vulnerable enough to look under that big rock, because it is not an easy rock to look under, nor is it supported by health movements. And so that's the area that I work.
Can I read a quote from your book? You say, "You can follow a certain diet until the cows come home, and you may very well feel better, and your antibodies may drop, and your anemia may go away. But unless you examine the real root of what's trying to come forward in your life through illness, everything will be a temporary fix." That's so much about what you're speaking into there. And I wanted to bring an analogy that I often use. So I say many connections in my brain have been damaged. And I think of rebuilding those connections like building a bridge. What do you need to build a bridge? You need supplies, you need skilled workers. Supplies would be the nutrition, the brain-building nutrition, the right kind of nutrition, and then healing your digestion so that you're actually getting that nutrition, right? And then the skilled workers would be the therapy, the targeted therapy, the right kind of therapy, the skilled workers, right? But along with that is the motivation, the purpose, the mindset, and I know you were like, I don't use the word mindset, but the loving, the loving the space inside of you and finding the purpose to put the work in and build those connections within the brain.
So you're a great example, Kevin, to speak about this, because your experience was so deep and profound that I would say that not only did you have to reestablish connections inside of your brain and your mind, your experience helped you reestablish the connections in your heart. And that is where the truest healing that we have on this planet comes from, always. It's the alpha and the omega. So that illness is here to wake us up to something. If we stay in that place of being the eternal student, trusting that, honoring that we have all the tools inside us to continually rework that relationship, then everything else is frosting.
Thank you so much for that. You're absolutely right. I was speaking with a friend who's a psychology major and was actually doing a entrepreneurial thing about what you overcome to become an entrepreneur, especially in this space, where you've been through a lot, right? And then you're like, I'm going to dive into this. But the biggest thing, she asked, well, what's the biggest hurdle you've had to overcome? And I thought pretty hard about it. And I was like, really? Fear. And overcoming fear came into loving myself. And, I'm going to pull out my book right now, because on the last page of the acknowledgments, which by the way are 12 pages, I got a lot of people I appreciate, and it could have been way more. So I say, lastly, I feel it's important to take this opportunity to acknowledge my appreciation for myself. There was a point where doing so was no easy task, but the demonstration of compassion, appreciation, and truthful expression with love that I am so fortunate to have received from many of the names mentioned have truly given me awareness. This awareness of my strengths and shortcomings and how I affect the lives around me has brought me the ability to know, love, and appreciate myself. In doing so, this work has become a true possibility. I feel blessed to pass on such a beautiful gift. By encouraging others and to appreciate and to love themselves, we give them the tools to truly love and appreciate others. And we sow the seeds that continue to heal the world. It starts with loving yourself.
And so one thing that might help here is that we all come to a moment where life is asking us to decide if we're worth our own fearlessness. Right?
Really?
So,
yes.
And so then but humans are so wrapped up in that ego place, which is, oh my God, this really bad thing happened to me. I just got diagnosed with, this illness, or this really bad, my husband just left me, or, the ego gets connected into this, which is, this bad thing happens to you, so you better fix it and get glamorous again. And so what this idea is, and, like Kevin, what's happened to you in your experience, Michelle, you too, is that we all come to the place where life keeps giving us, this is where illness is our big opportunity. Life keeps asking us, will you choose fearlessness for yourself?
And what do you mean? Will you choose fearlessness? Tell us what that means.
It means you have to be willing to go into the places where you've told yourself something that's not true. You've told yourself that you're not worthy. You've told yourself that God has forgotten about you. You've told yourself that if I pray hard enough, God will grant me my healing. You tell yourself that loving is always going to give up on me. You tell yourself, I can't trust others. You make up these beliefs to get yourself through hard times. And you do. And so they're really necessary. But then they create these misunderstandings that keep getting perpetuated. Well, then we have these difficult things that happen to us that push us up against this idea of, are we defining ourselves by our bigness? Are we defining ourselves by our lack? And this is what I see in the AIP movement a lot, is defining yourself by what's wrong with you. Where believing that you're worth your own fearlessness is a loving action. It's total surrender into trusting your life, and that there's something there for you that is going to build wisdom of your heart, not your brain, but your heart. And so that requires everybody to have a buy-in that you're worth your own fearlessness. And that's really scary. And there's not a lot of resources that teach you to do this, because it's not ego-based. It's not glamour-based. And so in my practice, when I say it's not about the diet, it's not about the diet. It's about my group is willing to very vulnerably examine these places that hurt. And we're all required to do it on our own individual journey. And I consider myself a hand holder. So I hold my clients' hands, and I feel very honored to bear witness to that, watching them do that. So they're the ones doing the healing. They're the ones who have the answers. And I am someone who helps them to kind of sort through that and walk through that.
So I have a question then, as I have been on this journey for the last number of years, and it's repeatedly come up to me. So why can't I do this for myself? And why is it so difficult for us? Why do we need to have those people beside us to walk us through, to hold our hands, to show us the way? Why can't we just tap into this, Jessica? If it's within us, why can't we just tap into it?
Well, I think you can, and there's many mystics and sadhus and saints that have. But, we kind of live in this modern world, and we get a lot bombarded through, to us. And so what I have found is that when people are truly present and they're loving you for your complete wholeness, that's a state of presence. And that contains a certain resonance. And I have found that all of the teachers I have had never can truly walk with me while I go through uncovering where my misunderstandings are. But there is a resonance that they hold through having done this work themselves, that a part of me is able to recognize, and it widens it for me. So I think that, Michelle, the part that you were saying is why can't I do this for myself? So then for you, maybe consider that the fearlessness on your own behalf or for yourself might be, am I willing to create a more compassionate relationship with the part of myself that keeps asking, why can't I do this?
This makes me think of our interview with Jared Nieder back in late December. And Jared is a quadriplegic who just has the best attitude that I've ever seen in my life.
Podcast number 32, Jared Nieder.
Yeah, fantastic. It was, and I talked about my New Year's resolution, which was to be more badass than the year before.
Well, Kevin, have you ever read that study that compared the happiness of people who have won the lottery versus quadriplegics?
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that
Guess
study.
who's happier?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, it's sort of being in this place of lack, or getting to this place where it's like, you know what? I've been broken down to where I've lost so much. Do I focus on what I've lost, or do I focus on what I have? And it's when you're in a place where you're brought down that to loss of so many abilities, and what most of us have no ability to even comprehend that state. But it's like when you brought it down to that, it's no longer an option whether you're gonna sweat the small stuff. Small stuff is minute. And I think I said this in our interview on the interview series, but Rachel Raymond wrote this beautiful analogy. She's like, and I'm paraphrasing, she says, when you're standing on the edge of life, looking over the vastness of it, so many of the things that used to matter don't matter anymore. Those things that still do matter a great deal more.
Well, because there's two ways to look at it. We can say there's so many chemicals in the environment. So many people are getting autoimmune disease, chronic disease as at an all-time high. Cancer rates, whatever statistics we might want to pull out. But then, so that's a lack perspective. And then we could look at it and say, wow, there must be something ready about the human spirit where life is getting your attention to the place where you can't ignore your grandness and your ability to love all the places inside of you. Isn't that amazing? And that's the place that I live my life in now, because life got so bad and got my attention so drastically that I couldn't not pay attention. And for that, it almost makes me tear up that the biggest disaster was the way through to the deepest understanding for loving myself and being fearless. I had to give up all of the stories that had defined me until that time, the stories that worked for a while. And then when we do this deeper dive into vulnerability, we start rearranging the stories and reworking the stories. Are we going to identify ourselves by what's wrong with us, what's wrong with the world, what's wrong with politics? Are we going to define ourselves by chaos helps unravel what's not working?
I liked how you brought up story, because story is so important. Even from a neurological perspective, we learn so effectively based on stories, which is why people remember fables,
Absolutely.
And there's lessons in each of those fables. It teaches you things. And tacking on to story, the story we tell ourselves. I was thinking about suffering. Suffering, suffering is definitely real. There are people who are exposed to painful stimuli consistently, and that's sad and terrible. But a lot of us have been exposed to painful stimuli, and then that painful stimulus is removed, but we continue to tell ourselves a story that perpetuates that pain. And that is a story that we choose. And I think telling ourselves a different story is not an easy task. Do you want to expand on that, Jessica?
Yeah. Well, it's not what happened to us. Like when you say that, it puts into this new context, which is, it is not what happened to us. It's what we decided about what happened to us.
Right.
And I always use this example of, think about like, kind of like a crazy, unrealistic story. Let's say you guys are in a plane, we're in a plane crash, right? And we all survive. And if you were to follow every person who had, we could say the exact same experience of being on a plane crash and surviving it,
Mm-hmm.
what each person decided about what happened to them on that plane crash solely determines how they fare from it. So some people are going to get PTSD. Some people are going to become inspirational speakers and write a book and decide to help other trauma people. Some people might get heart disease. Some people might become scared to, love other people. It's all the colors of the rainbow, right? So
Right.
we can say that it's not what happened to us; it's what we decide. And that question, just if we stay there, that kind of goes against a lot of, it busts the myth of positive and negative thinking. It busts the myth that we being in a supremely healthy state is always the goal, and so it kind of rearranges or shifts around the priority or the significance of things, so that for some people getting cancer is the way that their heart opens and their life radically heals.
And with this story, it makes me think of the hero's journey.
Yes.
No hero's journey is just rainbows and butterflies the whole time. Right? A hero needs to go through some tough things, and putting yourself in the hero's shoes, being like, "Hey, I'm the hero," right? Like, and building that perspective and telling that story and making it, as like I said in the interview with Jared, as badass as you can. It's valuable, it's valuable to your psyche and how you affect the lives around you.
It is. And I don't know harder work, and so we're sitting here talking about this, and it might sound really easy from the outside, but when life asks you to clear up a misunderstanding that God forgot about you, that takes, I still complain about this stuff. I still want it to be easy. I still want it to be different. I complain every time. So there's our human part too, which is, I love the part of myself that just wants it to be easier. But this is really tough. It's challenging. It's tough. And I believe it's what we were built to do.
You're absolutely right. I concur with my experience, Jessica. This is the toughest work, and the dedication I spent to honing my diet and being absolutely dedicated, a perfect performer. I was a perfect performer as you define it. And then finding this work, realizing that this is where I need to be, was not easy. And having people, my mentors, my directors, asking me the questions that they did, it allowed for profound thought, but oh my gosh, it was terrifying. I had one program director, he asked me, this was in a workshop, and he just asked me, he said, "Do you want to be here?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean? In this room or on this earth?" And he said, "Do you want to be on this earth?" And that just shocked me, because I had never thought of leaving the earth. I had never contemplated, even through all my trials, leaving in any way, shape, or form. But yet he was asking me to consider some very deep commitments on a subconscious level that I had never visited before. And suddenly that was terrifying when he said to me, do you think that these neurological injuries, 2 life-threatening brain injuries, are any sort of an indication that you want out? It would be easier to leave. I had to stop and consider what he was asking of me. And that was tough work.
Yeah, or be compassionate to the places that might say consciously or unconsciously, you know what, it would just be easier not to be doing this. And
Right.
and honoring that might be true not only for you, but for many, many, many people when they go through difficult times.
Right.
And so can we just lay down the standards? When I say lay down, I mean like let go of them. Can we just let go of those standards of how we're classifying people and just let everyone be completely in their humanness?
Mm-hmm.
And so in that regard, there's no part of us that isn't holy. And that the part that thinks this might be too difficult, maybe I should develop an exit strategy, is as holy as the part that knows how to, do the perfect diet. And that's the part that's the hardest work, is that our ugly, what we would consider to be our ugly, broken, or misunderstood places.
Yes.
That's the hardest part.
It is.
We're talking about how this is really difficult work, and I wanted to relay my experience because it was hard at first, but it got so much easier
Yes,
as the neuroplastic changes happened, and I began, building these pathways of like, this is the way I'm thinking. I'm not going to continue thinking that I'm a victim and wallow in my misfortune, because it's not going to get me anywhere. And it wasn't easy at first.
I think, go ahead, Jessica, please.
When you say that, Kevin, it's kind of cool because it sort of brings up this idea of like, wait, we're in charge of our life, and that everybody who's in it is we hired to get us into our loving.
Yes.
And so that bad boss, that crazy doctor, that man who broke our heart and left us, that person that stole all of our money, I'm using big examples that I hear in my practice all the time. We hired them to get into our loving.
I can relate to many.
Yes. So isn't that amazing? Like all those experiences that you had, or people that showed something to you, they were reflecting back something that was present inside of you. That was the way in. So we can either keep judging it, keep like complaining about it, or we can take that and stop judging it, rearrange our storyline, or decide that we're going to define ourselves by a different story and go into all of the parts inside of our heart.
Yes. And I think, Kevin, Jessica said it earlier, it wasn't just the neuroplasticity that was being rewired. It was the heart, the loving rewiring that was taking on new shape and new connections. And, Jessica, to support what you have just said, I had an epiphany and it was just a few months ago, really. I was outside, of course. I mean, that would be just a beautiful place to have an epiphany. And I have a lovely backyard. It's quite spacious, ornamental plum trees, purple blossoms, mayday tree, white blossoms. And it was just a lovely place to be. And when I finally felt the words inside me, I felt these words speak to me saying, you chose this. You chose the brain tumor. You chose the brain injury from the strep infection. And once I started to take responsibility for the challenges that were on my path to bring me to the place where I had the opportunity to open up and grow, just like the blossoms around me, it was very liberating. And I found, for just a moment, before I got back into story, I found that freedom. And it was beautiful, simply beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that. That is really beautiful.
I want to share a post I wrote on the first Thanksgiving after my injury, where I was giving thanks, and at one point, he goes, I thank a lot of people, and I say I'm so thankful to those who have. I'm even thankful to those who have done wrong by me, because I learned from them as well. And I love what you said about, like, we've brought these people into our world.
We've hired these people. I like
these
that.
people. And we can fire them too, for the most part. But yeah, we learn from them. We learn to love ourselves, and that's where the deepest healing begins, is with loving ourselves, and that's how we can love others. And
it brings up a good point though, Kevin, because a lot of people in my practice are like, you know what, you say I need to love my Hashimoto's and you can just forget it. Or you're saying I should love my MS. Come on, seriously. Like, and so, I think it's good for your listeners to note too, is that what you're talking about is this, like almost like this, a path. So you can love this idea of a path where, deciding that you're worth your own fearlessness is loving. Deciding to go in and be compassionate with the places inside of yourself that hurt is a loving action. And so it doesn't have to be like, oh, I have MS and I love MS. Because, that it can be simple things that we can do right now to examine the relationships that we have to everything in our life. That being vulnerable enough to do that is the path of loving. So it might not be all the way to, hey man, I love that car accident that I was in. So I would also caution everybody to consider that there's a practical piece, that we're all speaking about, because we've all had our opportunities, all of the three of us, to kind of do this work. And so we're not trying to water it down here to say, love your MS. We're kind of using it as an example of, like, because loving is an action. It's a very active thing. It's not passive at all. And it's become sort of represented as a passive thing. I need to love everything. I need to, be at one with everything. Well, okay, that would be great if it were true. But, it's actually when we're with all of the feelings and experiences that we have, and we accept all of them as holy, that's a loving action. And so that's one aspect here to just kind of point out.
I really like how you say that loving is an active action, because it takes a lot of attention to put towards something. And I often say attention is the most valuable resource that we own. And we only have so much in a day. And with that value being attention. And it's funny, we say pay attention, right? And I think our attention is an investment. So if our attention is being invested, if it's a investment into negative thoughts, hatred, or poor me kind of mentality, that's I don't think that has very good dividends. Whereas when we put our attention towards loving and towards appreciation, there's a lot more there. And I wanted to explore what you said about worth your own fearlessness. So if you are worth your own fearlessness, and you, I believe you said loving the place that is worth your own fearlessness. Do you want to repeat what you said there?
Well, one of the most healing things that we can do is deciding that we're worth our own fearlessness.
Right. And so that means fearlessness concerning our circumstances.
Yeah, or fearlessness to equally love all the parts of me.
Right. And so that's like the place where it's like, I ain't scared of my MS or my Hashimoto's. Like, what's up? Let's hang out, right? And being there so that you can be there with your condition and be fully present with that condition without fear, without
without
hatred
judgment,
or
without
things like that,
judgment.
or judgment.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're truly present, you're not fixing something. You're appreciating something because you're present with it. And so that's the sort of this idea, which is loving being in action. It means let's say that there's a part of let's say everybody has a really good friend and they have, they have an autoimmune disease. And you as your friend, they keep identifying themselves of like, why did I get this? I'm going to fight this disease, and I'm going to be a warrior. So, they kind of take this stance of control and fighting and fixing. So then it brings up this kind of this advanced idea, which is, can we let go of needing to fix the part of us that feels like it's a victim to our circumstances? And so what I love about this kind of work is that the parts of us that hurt just need our loving and don't need our fixing. And so when we add our own loving to the parts of ourselves that feel broken, victimized, we've got bad luck, the world is against us, that we actually don't need to fix those parts. That when we add the consciousness, our own consciousness of loving, by believing I'm fearless enough on my own behalf to love those places that hurt, then those places heal.
I have a lovely quote sitting on my windowsill looking out into the beautiful garden, and it says, "The difference between a weed and a flower is a judgment."
That's awesome.
Right.
Isn't it? And you know where it came from was one of my teabag quotes. The little pieces of paper that are stapled to one's tea bag. And I have hundreds of those. They are overflowing in my cupboard and in my minimalist purge, because I have realized in my life, there are a lot of things I don't need anymore. Stories and stuff. And yet this little quote remains on my windowsill. And I've been thinking about it a lot. How many times we judge and how many beautiful flowers we pass over because we have simply decided they are weeds. And, go ahead.
I'll give you an example of how this worked for me.
Yes, please.
When my husband and I split up, it was really, really, really painful. And so the first route that I went when all this happened was to rationalize it. Well, by putting him down or making him wrong. And, but I was really lucky in that I had a really great team of people who loved me so much. They weren't going to let that be the final solution to what I thought was my issue. And so about a year into this kind of work, I realized that I actually just didn't have the guts to leave the marriage because I was too scared. And I thought that living in an unhappy marriage was better than having to do it on my own. So I was willing to live this half life because I had safety and security.
Right.
And when I came to that realization that I actually didn't have the guts to do what he did, I called him right away. I thanked him. And that was the hardest part about the breakup, was reckoning the place inside of myself that didn't have the guts. And that what I thought, essentially spent an entire decade, my most prime decade of my 30s, in an unhappy place. And I was the first person in line to stay in that happy place. And loving that place inside of myself was the hardest work I've done on the planet so far, was accepting that there was a part of myself that didn't choose the bigger part of me, that wasn't brave, that didn't choose happiness, And here I am, a person who is very happy. You know, I meditated, I had therapists, you know, I was very involved in like whatever you would call like the positive mind movement. And yet I had a dirty little secret. Was in the end, I didn't have the guts. And so when I figured that place out, to hold her up and love her and say, oh my gosh, honey, well, that makes sense, you know, and to talk to her and to be with her every day, every single day. I love that part of me that just was too scared to choose otherwise, because it felt like it might have been annihilation. So I'm using this as an example because a lot of people who might be listening here can recognize that there might be a part of inside of themselves that is we're very self-judging, and that this is a daily thing, you know, where I just get up and like, oh, she's here. I'm going to let her sit at the table with me each day. The part that I felt like didn't have the strength or didn't have the courage. And it's just, this is the being fearlessness on your own behalf. Like I had to be willing to be brave enough to look at that part of myself. And that's the healing part. That actually in itself of just saying you exist and I love you and you haven't done anything wrong and I'm going to be with you. That is the healing. It's that right there. Saying that to yourself day in and day out.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for sharing that very personal journey, Jessica. Thank you so much.
Well, it's good because, you know, how else would I show others unless I had done it myself? And so,
and I think that when I first reached out to you, I don't know, 2 years ago, it was because I had read the post you had published online about that huge transition in your life and how your separation and subsequent divorce and sale of the house and redesigning of the family unit brought you to this place. And I knew it was foreshadowing for my own life. And I was so grateful that you spoke to that. And as Rumi writes, the wound is where the light enters you. And I often speak to my son about bringing up those ugly places in ourselves and just bringing them into the light because they want to be seen too. And then everything changes. Or
one good practical thing too for everybody is, what would it be like if everybody listening to this podcast woke up for the next 7 days and asked themselves 3 or 4 times a day, what might my illness be showing me about my life?
Kevin, we're posting that every day on our Facebook page for the next 7 days starting today.
All right.
Jessica, thank you for that. Thank you kindly. Yeah, let's do it.
It is a point. Yeah, but where can people find you, Jessica?
My website is aiplifestyle.com. Although I do have to say I'm not very active there anymore because I don't do very much AIP anymore. But I do run a really popular Facebook group called Beyond AIP. Highly recommend that. So I'm found there a lot. And I'm on Instagram, AIP Lifestyle. And I also have a Facebook page, The Autoimmune Protocol Diet.
Right.
Perfect.
And to read more and find your blog posts, they are on what website, please?
That's the aiplifestyle.com.
Excellent.
Right.
Jessica, thank you so much for the gift of your time this morning, your wisdom, your experience, and sharing this with all of our listeners.
All right. Well, that's a wrap, y'all. Man, it is so good having Jessica on the podcast. She is such a warm, loving, radiant ball of light.
She embodies everything she practices in work and personal life. I mean, I love her concept. Well, it's not necessarily her concept. She embodies, embraces, and practices the concept of cooperation versus the fight against. And it's so important we talk about acceptance, but moving beyond that and cooperating so that we can continue being in motion and continue healing and moving forward. Right. It's all in cooperation with ourselves and with the people around us, our environment.
There you go. Yes, with ourselves and with others. Like, we want to be in a place of cooperation and not competition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it really brings, I find, when we take a step into that perspective, operate from that perspective, there comes a gentleness. And I, for one, I've really benefited by being much gentler with myself. I push. After being diagnosed with a type A personality, I understand. Yeah, what do I know? But I've really had to learn how to be much gentler, kinder, and warmer toward myself. And I really appreciate Jessica's work because it reminds me to do just that.
Likewise. I want to let you guys know that How to Feed a Brain, my new book, is available on Amazon. So go pick it up and please leave us a review. It's super helpful. It gets us more visibility so that we can reach more people with this powerful information and change more lives. Also, the interview series that we launched, Feed a Brain interview series with some of the top brain and nutrition experts of our time. I feel
including
so privileged.
Jessica.
Including Jessica, yeah.
Yes, and you were so privileged. I'm sorry to cut you off.
It's true. It's true. And yeah, so that is available. You can actually preview it at feedabrain.com/preview.
Excellent. Thank you. And that was so much work. I remember your planning stages, and it's great to see it all come together, see it all launched. And now, people, can you imagine if we'd have had these resources as we were going through our recovery, Calvin? So it's wonderful to be able to refer people to everything that you've created here on AIBI and Feed a Brain.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, it's been a journey.
Yes.
If you would like to support us, you can do so at feedabrain.com/support. Or you can tip the podcast, essentially. Head over to patreon.com/AIBI for Adventures in Brain Injury. Throw a buck or two or more, Helps us a whole lot.
It does. It does, yes. So thank you, everyone. And we'll see you on podcast number 34.
All right.
Bye for now.
Next time. Bye.
Someone take me to a doctor.